Hey, how are you today? This is Josh Patrick, and you're at Cracking the Cash Flow Code. And my guest today is Dr. Sabrina Sterling. And Dr. Sabrina has come highly recommended from a person who's in one of my mastermind groups, which is a peer-to-peer mastermind. And she also is a Profit First consultant. And I met her first when I did a program for Mike McCallowitz down at their headquarters, probably 3 or 4 years ago. I'm sure it was before COVID. Instead of having me just yonder on, let's bring Dr. Sabrina on, we'll start the conversation. Hey, Dr. Sabrina, how are you today?
Hey there, Josh. I'm great. I'm very excited for our conversation. I love the topic of your podcast, Cracking the Cash Flow Code. That's a huge struggle for most business owners. So let's dig into things.
Yes, it was a big struggle for me. Still is. So when we, chatted a few weeks ago, we were talking about the difference between individual coaching and group coaching. And you have a very, very successful group coaching program, and your preference is to do groups over individuals. Can
Yes.
you kind of talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I love getting to talk with you about this topic. It's not one that I get asked about very often, and I think it's such an important consideration because business owners who once you decide you want a coach, you start on the hunt looking for where do I find a coach and what should I even be looking for? And a lot of times we have in mind that our situation is so unique and so different. We really need to work with a coach individually. And I've had experience doing both myself. I've had my individual coaches, and right now I'm in a group coaching program that has an individual component in it. And I will tell you from my own experience, I get so much more out of being in a group coaching program that has some individual component in it versus having worked with a private coach for 6 months or a year and having meetings where it's just focused on me and my issues. And I feel so strongly about the value of group for us business owners that at Tap the Potential, that's how we do it. And years ago, when I pivoted from doing individual clients and having clients in groups, I did it because I would go from one individual client meeting to another. And I would hear them talking about the same thing. And the hardest thing for me was when I had just helped another client solve that issue in their business and they were having success in the system that they implemented. And then I would go to the next client who had the same issue and I would say, here's what will work. And I would say, we just did it in this other client's business and it worked. And they would give me all kinds of reasons why it wouldn't work in their business. And I just thought to myself, if they could just hear that other business owner talk about why this is working in their business and the success with it, they're not having someone say, you should do this, so that resistance doesn't come up. And they could just hear the success of the other business owner and they would get curious about, I wonder if this would work for me too. And so I think when it comes to making a decision for ourselves about group versus individual, number one, at Tap the Potential in our Better Business, Better Life program, we have business owners across industries. So when you're listening to another business owner in another industry, you think you have nothing in common with them. And what you come to find out is, wow, we're in totally different industries and we have the same issues. So there's this sense of relief, number one, that I'm not alone in this. And what's interesting to me is that so many of us entrepreneurs, we feel isolated, we feel alone, we feel like no one understands what we're going through. And as a matter of fact, with our Better Business, Better Life assessment, we've been analyzing the data that we get from entrepreneurs. 1 out of 2 entrepreneurs feels like no one understands us. That's a very lonely place to be, and it's a setup for burnout. And so when we come into a group with other business owners in other industries and we hear they have the same issues, all of a sudden we don't feel isolated. And that starts to create this sense of support. And I'm a psychologist by training. And when it comes to supporting business owners in getting their business systems in place and doing the things strategically that they need to do so they have good cash flow and have a business that supports their life, if we are not taking care of ourselves mentally, we can't do all those other things. So there's a huge value in us coming together in a group environment and feeling the support and the connection with other business owners who get us and who understand us. That the value from that is irreplaceable. But there's also a piece that happens in a group that doesn't happen individually, and it's the accountability. So, yes, your individual coach may check in with you from week to week or every 2 weeks on what you're doing. Did you say you were going to do it? But if you didn't do it, really, you're just saying to them, I didn't do it, and here's all the reasons why. If you're in a group setting and your coach is checking in with you on the commitments that you made, and all your peers in the group got their commitments done, and you were the only one who didn't get your commitments done, there's huge pressure on you now because you don't want to be that only one who's not getting things done. And that's a big challenge for us business owners is no one holds us accountable. In a group
Yeah.
setting, that accountability is heightened. And what we see with our Better Business, Better Life clients is they take these small steps forward from meeting to meeting that because they're taking them in a consistent direction, it really leads to big change over time.
Oh, there's two things that I would add on top of that. One is about 85% of every business is exactly the same.
Mm-hmm.
And most business owners, it's that 15% that's different that makes your business and or your industry unique. And if someone's skillful as moderating the group as you are, it probably takes you no more than an hour or two to pick up what that 15% is.
Mm-hmm.
The second thing is, which I think is a bigger reason why you want to have groups versus individual coaching, is that nobody in the entrepreneur's company ever tells them the truth. They
Yeah.
think they do. They'll tell you they do. They say, no, 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 my people will always tell me the truth. And I've yet to find a business where that actually happens. The people who work for you, your team members, they're trying to figure out what you want to hear, and then they will tell you that. When you're in a
Yes.
peer-to-peer group, that doesn't happen because there is no reason for the other people in the group, except they might not want to come off as jerks, to tell you something you want to hear. They're more likely to tell you what you need to hear versus what you want to hear. Does that make
Yes.
sense?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And, along those same lines of what we need versus what we want, when you work individually, you talk to your individual coach about what you want to talk about. I mean, that's the question. What do you want to talk about? And so, whatever it is you want to talk about is what gets focused on in coaching. When you're in a group and each person is bringing what they want to talk about, other people in your group will bring up issues or topics that you think you have no connection to or no need to hear about. And as that starts getting talked about in the group, you realize, oh my gosh, this was a huge blind spot for me in my business. I didn't know I needed to be paying attention to these things or addressing these things. And so things come up in group where you get to learn from what the others are getting coached on. And you find that it may not be what you thought you wanted, and it's exactly what you needed at that time.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense to me. So, in your opinion, what is the perfect size group and why?
So this is we study this carefully at Tap the Potential because obviously as a business owner, the more people we can get in group, the more profitable we're going to be. That's just an efficiency issue. And at the same time, we want to balance that with quality of delivery and making sure that each business owner gets the individualized attention that they need. And so we have found that for our newer clients coming into group where we're doing a lot of teaching, and it's a lot of teaching and Q&A, getting them going with things, we can have up to 10 pretty comfortably and we call that our foundations program. And then in our Better Business, Better Life, where they're advancing, we try to keep it to 5 to 6 because now, and this is where we're getting into that 15% of uniqueness, right? So if 85% applies to everyone, we need the ability to be able to address that 15% uniqueness. So that's where we have these smaller groups where people get plenty of individualized attention. And we also offer the opportunity to meet with our strategists one-to-one every quarter, at least once for an in-depth meeting. And that's where we can talk about that. And then as we have people who ascend with us and get into our higher level program, that's where we can again benefit from having more people in there because their business, they have their solid business foundation in place, and now they're looking at innovation and uniqueness, and they love the diversity of opinions and perspectives. That really becomes important again. So it's a fine balance, and it depends on what stage.
And what's the perfect amount of time for a group to meet, do you think?
Well,
We might
I
have a discussion about this because I actually have an opinion
yes,
about it.
I would love to hear your opinion on this. For me personally, getting through a 90-minute meeting is a challenge. So that is my maximum length of time. The ideal is, 75 minutes, depending on the group size. And if it's more teaching, really getting to be about an hour. What are
You
your
know,
thoughts on that?
when I was in YPO, um, YPO has a thing called forums, which is 8 or 9 people in a group. Very similar to group coaching, except it's self-moderated. There's no
Hmm.
outside moderator for it. And those meetings would go for 4 hours, which I thought was sometimes a bit long and sometimes a bit repetitive because for a 4 hour meeting, you would often hear the same problem come up every single month. And after about 5 months, someone would say, will you please do something about this? Shut up. Um, I now have a mastermind group. We started at 2 hours, and what we found, there's 6 of us in the group, that we weren't getting enough airtime for each of us. So we went to 2.5 hours. And
Hmm.
I would say 2.5 hours, if there's a lot of individual conversation without, a tremendous amount of coaching, is
Hmm.
a really good time because it gives you enough time for everybody to get airtime and feel like they've not been cheated.
Yeah.
I'm in a group right now where we do every other week we have a group, and then the other week we have individual coaching, and I'm a member of that group, and it meets for 1 hour, and that's just way too short
Hmm.
because you're basically getting 10 minutes for each person, and you just can't get anything accomplished in 10 minutes, really, in my opinion.
Hmm.
So I've kind of come down that the 2 hour, 2.5 hour for a group of 6 or 7 is the right amount of time. If you have 4 or 5, obviously you don't need that much because you certainly don't need a half an hour a person. But I think probably 20 minutes to 25 minutes per person is what you probably should be thinking about if it's
Hmm.
a true conversation. If there's more teaching, obviously you're teaching a lesson, and that can be done in less time.
Yeah.
Um,
And I
I,
I think too it makes a difference if it's in person or virtual. So in my experience, it's easier for us to be in person longer than a
mhm,
virtual meeting.
yep. Yeah, well, I would say 4 hours virtual is way
Mhm.
too long. I mean,
Mhm.
our 2.5 hour meeting is virtual, and
Mhm.
that seems to work okay.
Mhm.
And we're not really running out of steam. Now we're going to do a 2 day retreat together, and that's going to be a whole different ballgame. So we'll probably get
Mhm.
into some more in-depth stuff. I may actually pull out some of my old YPO exercises and see if we want to do them because in the YPO forums, there was a retreat that went for 2 days every year. So I'd like to pivot just for a second because I think this is, I'm hoping the folks who are listening realize that group coaching is not a bad thing. I recently had a conversation with a potential client. I said, well, we have individual, we have group. He said, I don't want group, I want individual. And the truth is he'd be better off in a group.
Mhm.
And now he's out there looking at all sorts of other options out there. So we'll see what happens. But
Yeah.
I'm going to remind him that, group is probably where you should start. And if you need individual, then, we can do that every once in a while. But the group is probably going to do you a lot better because you need somebody besides me to tell you to get a life.
Well, and in my experience, when we've had people who request individual, my reply to that is try the group. And
Yep.
exactly like you just said, if you feel like you need more after that, we can add on some individual. Most of the time, once people get into group, they realize, no, this is exactly what I need. I didn't need that individual time, and it's almost as though once the need is met, it's met, and that's it. And you realize there's a lot more value from being in the group than spending that individual time.
Yeah, I think even the groups like Vistage, which is a huge multinational organization, even though they do have individual coaching, most of the Vistage members I've ever talked to really never talk about the individual coaching because at best it's um, it's not very even. Some are good, some are
Mhm.
not so good. The groups they universally all love because, frankly, people like talking about their business and they like to get. I the entrepreneurs I know, especially first generation entrepreneurs, second generations are a different ball game, but first generation entrepreneurs are really thirsty to hear the
Yes.
truth, and
Yes.
they just don't get it.
Hmm.
I'm way better with first generation than second because I'm not very diplomatic and I tend to tell people exactly what I think. And I do fine with first generation entrepreneurs with that. With second generations, they've heard it from their parents for so long. And when they finally get
Hmm.
a chance to do it, they really don't want constructive feedback. What they really want is people telling them how wonderful they are because they never heard it before.
Well, and I also find as I've been working with some second generation entrepreneurs, one of the challenges that they have is if they want to do it differently, how to navigate that in the business. And they get, I think about some of our retreat participants, they've gotten tremendous value from hearing constructive feedback from their peers, first generation or second generation, it doesn't matter, around how to navigate those difficult conversations with the family members who have been in the business a long time and are used to doing things a certain way. So again, it comes back to those fresh perspectives that are so valuable.
And I have found that to get the second generation to be heard by the first generation needs coaching on that. They need to be told, and I do this. I do a fair amount of rising generation work, and I really like it.
Mhm. Mhm.
And what I have found is that the senior generation needs to be told point blank that the rising generation, whether it's managers or its children, are going to do it differently. That doesn't mean it's worse. It's just different. It'll be better or it'll be worse, but it won't be the same. And if
Mhm.
it's worse, we put safety things in so you can stop at the slide if it happens. But it
Yeah.
usually doesn't. Usually it's way better.
Yeah. Innovation for sure needs to happen.
Well, the truth is, and there's been some really interesting brain research, is that people do the most innovative work in their life up until they're 30. Like if you look at physicists,
Hmm.
almost all the great physicist breakthroughs are before the scientist becomes 30, 35 years old.
Hmm.
Now, if you look at the best work historians do, it's in their 70s. So it's a different type of brain process that goes there. And
Hmm.
if you can help the elder generation understand that they bring wisdom to the party, but they don't
Yeah.
bring the quick thinking that their kids do or their managers do to the party because their brain works differently. And that's
Hmm.
kind of an interesting conversation to have with folks. I don't know if you've ever done that with people.
Yeah, and it's really appreciating the value of the multiple generations in the business. And this applies it's not just if you have a family-based business and you're the second generation. This applies to a business where you have business owners like at Tap the Potential. We're in our 40s and 50s. And then we have a younger generation of team members, and they bring a whole different perspective. And we are integrating and blending the two because that's how we innovate. They see things and opportunities we don't see because they are digitally different than us, and what they've been exposed to in their life experience is very different from ours. And so it keeps us fresh, but helping businesses navigate those different generations. I had a VIP client, which is a previous group client, who now works with me one-on-one, and that was his big issue that he was bringing into the VIP is how do I make sure we stay current? Because we have our staid, tried and true things that we do, but we also know that's going to get outdated at some point. And we did all kinds of work around how to keep him current.
So, what percent do you think wisdom can play for success in the business versus innovative thinking?
Well, I know from some recent research that I did on creativity that 77% of economic growth comes from micro innovations. So, innovation, creativity is key to us growing our businesses. I believe businesses are either growing or going backwards. There's no such thing as I'm going to get my business to this point and stay there. That just doesn't
It
happen.
does not happen.
And so we need to be continually mindful of how do we keep the innovation going. And everything that I'm coming up with in the research is bringing in new team members, staying in contact with our top clients and customers, hearing their needs, and pulling ideas together from these multiple places to create these small innovations that actually over time build up the small steps forward, the small innovations build up over time and really help us in our businesses become very unique in the eyes of our top clients and customers.
Yeah, I have found that by having a good innovation process in a company, about 95 to 97% of your innovations are fail fast, fail cheap things, small experiments that work.
Yes,
But
yes.
every once in a while, and this is where I have a thing against goals. I hate goals, and I think goals are limiting because of this. Because every once in a while, you get an improvement that is so dramatic and so big that you could have never, never, never dreamed you would do it. And I tell the story. I used to have a food service and vending company, and we improved our productivity with our route drivers with glass front snack machines 400%. We did this over a 3-year period. But if I had a goal to
Mm,
improve productivity, it sure wouldn't be 400%. It might have been
no.
10%. And
Yeah.
this was a pure, it was a fail fast, fail cheap, small experiments. And the experiments kept working, and we kept doing them faster and faster and faster and bigger and bigger and bigger because we said, let's really take a big jump here and see what happens. And man,
Hmm.
was it powerful.
Hmm.
Dr. Sabrina, unfortunately, we are out of time and we could go
Yes.
on. I've got like 5 other topics I would love to talk with you about. And
I'm happy to come back.
this has been really a whole lot of fun. So I would bet people will want to find you and learn more about your program. So how would they go about doing that?
Well, if they're listening to this, they're probably a podcast listener. So I have the Profit by Design podcast where every week I share tips, tools, and strategies for designing a sustainably profitable business that supports you in having a high quality of life. You could also go to our tapthepotential.com webpage. And on the webpage, we have in our hamburger menu a link to resources. I have tons of resources there. I've been at this for 17 years. And one of the favorites that we get requests for over and over is how to make your time worth $10,000 an hour as an entrepreneur. And so if you go to our tapthepotential.com page, go find the resources. That resource is one of many that is listed on that resource page for you to enjoy.
Super. And I have two things I'd like you to do. The first one I've asked you about 397 times or something like that, which is go to wherever you're listening to this podcast and give us an honest rating and review. Those reviews are really important. If you love us, say it. If you don't love us, well, you can say that too. I'll only cry a little bit. And the second thing is I've had this thing, which is sort of our entry into programs we do. We call it the Financial Freedom Accelerator. And the truth is, most business owners, when I talk to them, I ask them what their retirement plan is, and they say, they wave around their office and say, this is my retirement plan. And the sad truth is, it's about 30% of your retirement plan on average. So the Financial Freedom Project first helps you figure out whether that's true or not. And if it's not true, the second step is what can you do to make it true, which is what we call pre-funding your retirement. And we have lots of strategies around there, and we help you choose the right one for you. To learn more about the program, it's really easy. Just go to www.sustainablebusiness.co/freedom. That's www.sustainablebusiness.co/freedom. And you'll get some information about the Financial Freedom Project and see if you want to learn more about it and maybe have a conversation with me. So this is Josh Patrick with Dr. Sabrina. You're at Cracking the Cash Flow Code. Thanks a lot for stopping by. I hope to see you back here really soon.